The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Marcus pushed his cleaning cart down the empty corridor of Meridian Corporate Tower. It was nearly midnight, and the building had finally surrendered to silence after another frantic day of board meetings and conference calls. His weathered hands gripped the mop handle with the same careful precision he once used to hold therapy tools, back when his life had meaning beyond these sterile hallways. He paused outside the executive suite, adjusting the small photo tucked into his shirt pocket. His daughter Emma smiled back at him from the creased image, her gap-toothed grin reminding him why he endured the dismissive glances and whispered comments about the night janitor. Every swipe of his mop was another dollar toward her school supplies, another step closer to the life she deserved. The sound of soft footsteps echoed from around the corner. Marcus glanced up, surprised to see anyone this late. A small figure appeared, no more than 7 years old, wandering the halls in expensive clothes that seemed too formal for a child. Her dark hair fell across her face as she walked with purpose toward nowhere in particular. Marcus had seen her before, always alone, always silent. The daughter of some high-powered executive who worked impossible hours. He watched as she settled into her usual spot by the large window overlooking the city, drawing invisible patterns on the glass with her finger. Something about her reminded him of the children he used to help, back when he had a different name on an office door and parents brought their struggling kids to him for answers. Marcus continued his methodical cleaning routine, but his attention kept drifting to the small figure by the window. The child hadn't moved in 20 minutes, her shoulders hunched in a way that spoke of burdens too heavy for someone so young. He recognized the posture from his previous life, when concerned parents would bring their children to his office seeking help for trauma-induced silence. The executive offices on this floor belonged to the most powerful people in the building. Through the glass walls, Marcus could see Victoria Sterling's corner office, its lights still blazing despite the late hour. She was the company's youngest vice president, known for her ruthless efficiency and 12-hour workdays. The woman barely acknowledged his existence when their paths crossed, treating him like part of the furniture. As Marcus worked closer to where the child sat, he noticed her small hands trembling slightly. She pressed her palm against the cool glass, and he could see her breath fogging the window in shallow, quick puffs. Every instinct from his years as a pediatric speech therapist told him this little girl was in distress. He slowed his cleaning, giving himself more time to observe. The child wore a navy dress with pearl buttons, the kind of outfit chosen by someone who valued appearance over comfort. Her shoes were expensive but looked uncomfortable, and she kept shifting her weight from foot to foot. Most telling of all, her lips moved silently, as if she were having conversations only she could hear. Marcus had worked with dozens of children like this, kids whose voices had been stolen by trauma, illness, or simply the overwhelming pressure of their circumstances. Marcus made a decision that went against every company policy he'd been taught. He quietly wheeled his cart closer to where the child sat, pretending to clean the nearby water fountain. The little girl glanced up at him with startling green eyes that held depths of sadness no child should carry. "Hello there," he said softly, his voice carrying the gentle tone he'd perfected during years of working with frightened children. "I'm Marcus. I clean the offices here at night." The child studied him carefully but remained silent. Her eyes tracked his movements as he continued his work, noting how he moved with deliberate calm, never making sudden gestures that might startle her. Marcus had learned long ago that trust with traumatized children came in microscopic increments. From Victoria Sterling's office came the sharp sound of her voice on yet another conference call. The woman's tone was clipped and impatient as she discussed quarterly projections with someone on the other coast. Marcus noticed how the child's shoulders tensed at her mother's raised voice, her small body curling inward like a flower closing against harsh weather. "You know," Marcus said conversationally as he wiped down the fountain, "my daughter Emma is about your age. She loves to draw pictures and leave them where I'll find them when I get home from work. Sometimes the best conversations happen without any words at all." The child's head tilted slightly, the first sign of real engagement he'd seen. Her hand moved to the condensation on the window, and she began tracing what looked like a heart shape in the moisture. Marcus smiled, recognizing the universal language of a child reaching out. Over the following weeks, Marcus began timing his cleaning schedule to coincide with the child's late-night visits to the hallway. He learned that her name was Sophia when he overheard Victoria barking instructions to her assistant about picking up Miss Sterling from her tutoring session. The formal title felt wrong for such a small person, but it explained the rigid posture and careful movements. Each night, Marcus would find Sophia in her usual spot by the window, sometimes with homework spread across the floor, other times simply staring out at the city lights. He established a quiet routine of cleaning nearby, occasionally sharing gentle observations about the weather or the patterns of lights in the buildings across the street. Tonight, he noticed Sophia had brought a small notebook. She was writing in it with intense concentration, her pencil moving in quick, nervous strokes. When she saw Marcus approaching with his cart, she quickly closed the notebook and held it against her chest like a shield. Marcus continued his work without comment, but he pulled a small packet of crackers from his lunch bag and set it on the window ledge near where she sat. His daughter Emma had packed extra snacks for him that morning, insisting he might get hungry during his long night shift. Sophia's eyes followed his movements as he worked. When he finished cleaning the area and began to move away, she reached out and touched the crackers. Her lips moved silently, forming what looked like the word thank you, though no sound emerged. Marcus pretended not to notice, but his heart clenched with recognition. This was selective mutism, likely triggered by trauma or overwhelming stress. The breakthrough came on a particularly cold Thursday night when Marcus found Sophia crying silently by the window. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she clutched her notebook, and he could see pages torn and crumpled on the floor around her. Through the glass wall of Victoria's office, he watched the woman pace back and forth, her phone pressed to her ear as she gestured angrily at whatever crisis demanded her attention at midnight. Marcus knelt down and began collecting the torn pages, smoothing them gently. They were filled with Sophia's careful handwriting, words and sentences that told stories of a lonely little girl who had stopped speaking after her father left 2 years ago. The pages revealed her desperate attempts to communicate through writing, and her mother's frustrated responses when teachers suggested therapy. Without looking directly at Sophia, Marcus began speaking quietly about his own daughter Emma. He told her about the time Emma had been so scared of thunderstorms that she wouldn't speak for days, how they had created a special code using drawings and hand signals until her voice returned. He spoke about patience and understanding, about how sometimes the bravest thing was to stay silent until you felt safe enough to find your voice again. Sophia stopped crying and listened. Slowly, she opened her notebook to a fresh page and began writing. When she finished, she held it up for Marcus to see. In careful letters, she had written, "My daddy left because I was too quiet. Mommy says I need to try harder to be normal." Marcus felt his chest tighten with familiar anger at how adults could misunderstand a child's pain. Marcus read Sophia's message and felt the familiar weight of a child's misplaced guilt. He had seen it countless times in his former practice, children who blamed themselves for their parents' failures. He sat down on the floor beside her, ignoring company protocols about maintaining professional distance. "You know something important, Sophia," he said gently, using her name for the first time. "When grown-ups leave, it's never because of anything a child did or didn't do. Sometimes adults have problems they don't know how to fix, and they make choices that hurt the people they love most." Sophia wrote quickly in her notebook and showed him the page. "But I should have talked more. Maybe he would have stayed if I wasn't broken." Marcus shook his head slowly. "You're not broken, sweetheart. You're protecting yourself the only way you know how. That's actually very smart and very brave." Through the office window, Victoria's voice rose again, sharp with frustration as she spoke to someone about quarterly earnings and market projections. Marcus noticed how Sophia flinched at her mother's tone, her small body tensing as if preparing for impact. He began telling her about the children he used to work with, careful not to reveal his professional background but sharing stories of kids who had found their voices again through patience and understanding. He talked about a little boy who only spoke to his goldfish for months, and a girl who communicated through elaborate drawings until one day she surprised everyone by singing. Sophia listened intently, occasionally writing responses in her notebook. Her tears had stopped, and Marcus could see the beginning of hope flickering in her green eyes. The following week brought a shift in their nightly routine. Sophia began leaving small drawings tucked under the edge of the window where Marcus would find them. Crayon sketches of flowers, butterflies, and sometimes a small figure that looked like a man pushing a cleaning cart with a smile drawn in careful detail. Each picture felt like a whispered conversation, and Marcus treasured them like the precious communications they were. One evening, Marcus brought his own contribution to their silent exchange. From his pocket, he pulled out a small origami crane that Emma had taught him to fold. He placed it gently beside Sophia's latest drawing, a picture of two people sitting by a window under a starry sky. Sophia's eyes widened with delight as she examined the paper bird. She picked it up carefully, turning it over in her small hands as if it were made of the most delicate glass. Then she opened her notebook and wrote, "How did you make it fly without wings?" Marcus smiled and began showing her the simple folds, his hands moving slowly so she could follow along. They worked together in comfortable silence, creating a small flock of paper birds while Victoria's muffled voice continued its endless stream of business calls from behind the glass wall. As Sophia concentrated on her folding, Marcus noticed her lips moving slightly, as if she were whispering instructions to herself. It was the closest thing to vocalization he had witnessed, and his trained instincts recognized it as a significant step forward. Her voice was still there, buried beneath layers of hurt and fear, but waiting for the right moment to emerge. The tension in Victoria Sterling's office had reached a breaking point. Marcus could hear her sharp voice cutting through the glass as she spoke with what sounded like another expensive specialist. The words therapy failure and treatment options drifted into the hallway, followed by her frustrated declaration that she had tried everything and nothing was working. Sophia sat frozen by the window, her small hands clutched around the origami crane Marcus had made for her. Her breathing had become shallow and rapid, the same pattern Marcus recognized from children experiencing anxiety attacks. She pressed herself closer to the glass, as if trying to disappear into the city lights beyond. Marcus abandoned his cleaning cart and sat down beside her, his presence steady and calm. He began speaking in the low, soothing tone he had perfected during years of crisis intervention. He told her about the ocean, describing waves that came and went, how even the strongest storms eventually gave way to peaceful waters. As he spoke, Sophia's breathing began to slow. She opened her notebook and wrote with shaking hands, "She's talking about sending me away to a special school. She says I'm too much trouble." Marcus felt his heart break for this little girl who carried such an enormous burden of misplaced responsibility. Behind the office glass, Victoria's voice rose again, mentioning residential programs and intensive interventions. The woman meant well, but she was approaching her daughter's silence like a business problem to be solved rather than a wounded heart that needed healing. Sophia looked up at Marcus with eyes full of terror, silently pleading for someone to understand that she wasn't broken, just scared. Marcus knew he was about to cross a line that could cost him his job, but watching Sophia's silent panic made the decision easy. He reached into his wallet and pulled out his old business card, one of the few remnants from his previous life as Dr. Marcus Chen, pediatric speech pathologist. The edges were worn from years of carrying it, a reminder of who he used to be before Emma's mother left and financial desperation forced him into night shift cleaning. "Sophia," he said quietly, "I want to tell you something important. Before I worked here, I used to help children like you find their voices again. I know exactly what you're going through, and I know you're not broken." Sophia stared at the card, her eyes moving over the credentials and degrees listed beneath his name. She looked up at him with a mixture of confusion and hope, then wrote quickly in her notebook. "Why are you cleaning floors if you're a doctor?" Marcus explained simply that sometimes life takes unexpected turns, that he needed a job with steady hours to take care of Emma when her mother left them. He told her that helping people didn't always require an office or a title, that sometimes the most important healing happened in quiet moments between two people who understood each other. From Victoria's office came the sound of another phone call, this one to what sounded like an admissions counselor at a residential facility. Marcus could hear her discussing evaluation dates and program requirements, her voice clinical and detached as if she were arranging a business merger rather than discussing her daughter's future. Sophia's grip tightened on the business card as tears began flowing down her cheeks. Victoria Sterling's office door suddenly swung open, and she strode into the hallway with her phone still pressed to her ear. She stopped short when she saw Marcus sitting on the floor beside her daughter, his cleaning cart abandoned nearby. Her eyes narrowed as she took in the scene, the origami birds scattered around them, Sophia's tear-stained face, and the business card clutched in her small hands. "What exactly is going on here?" she demanded, ending her call with a sharp tap. Her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to immediate answers and unquestioned compliance. Marcus stood slowly, his movements deliberate and calm despite the danger he now faced. "Ma'am, your daughter was upset. I was simply trying to help." Victoria's gaze shifted to the business card in Sophia's hands, and her expression darkened further. "You've been giving my daughter your personal information? This is completely inappropriate. I'm calling security immediately." She reached for her phone, but Sophia suddenly stood up, still clutching the card. For the first time since Marcus had known her, the little girl stepped directly between two adults, her small body trembling but her stance determined. Victoria paused, clearly surprised by her daughter's uncharacteristic assertiveness. "Sophia, get away from him right now. This man has been manipulating you." Marcus watched as something shifted in Sophia's expression. The fear was still there, but it was now mixed with something else, something that looked remarkably like courage. Her lips began to move, forming silent words as she struggled against the barriers that had kept her voice locked away for so long. Sophia looked up at her mother, then at Marcus, her small chest rising and falling with the effort of what she was about to do. The hallway fell silent except for the distant hum of the building's ventilation system and the muffled sounds of the city far below. "No," came the whisper, so soft it was barely audible. But it cut through the silence like a thunderclap. Victoria froze, her phone halfway to her ear. The word hung in the air between them, fragile and precious and absolutely unmistakable. Sophia's voice grew stronger, though still quiet. "He's not bad, Mommy. He's the only one who listens to me. He's the only one who understands." Victoria's phone slipped from her hand, clattering to the floor as she stared at her daughter in shock. 2 years of silence, hundreds of therapy sessions, thousands of dollars spent on specialists, and her daughter's first words were spoken in defense of the night janitor. Marcus felt tears sting his eyes as he watched Sophia find her courage. She was still trembling, but her voice continued, each word a small miracle. "He used to help kids like me," she said, holding up the business card. "He knows about being scared and sad and not having words. He doesn't think I'm broken." Victoria's legs seemed to give out beneath her as she sank into a nearby chair, her powerful executive composure crumbling as she truly heard her daughter's voice for the first time in 2 years. The sound was everything she had hoped for and nothing like she had imagined it would come. 3 months later, Marcus sat in his new office on the 15th floor of Meridian Tower, the morning sunlight streaming through windows that no longer needed his cleaning. The nameplate on his desk read Dr. Marcus Chen, Director of Employee Family Services, a position Victoria had created specifically for him after learning about his credentials and witnessing the miracle he had worked with her daughter. Sophia visited him every day after school, no longer the silent shadow wandering empty hallways but a bright, talkative girl who filled his office with laughter and stories about her friends and teachers. Her voice, once lost, had returned stronger than ever, carrying with it a confidence that came from knowing she was truly heard and understood. Victoria had transformed as well, learning to listen to her daughter instead of simply providing solutions. She attended family therapy sessions that Marcus facilitated, slowly rebuilding the connection that had been damaged by years of misunderstanding and misdirected efforts. Emma and Sophia had become fast friends, bonding over shared love of origami and storytelling. The two girls often played in Marcus's office while he worked, their voices creating a symphony of childhood joy that reminded him why he had chosen his profession in the first place. As Marcus watched Sophia teach Emma how to fold a paper butterfly, he reflected on how the most important healing often happened in the most unexpected places. Sometimes being seen and valued required nothing more than someone willing to sit quietly beside you and wait for your voice to find its way home. The building still hummed with activity around them, but now it felt alive with possibility rather than empty corporate efficiency.